Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Infernal Intercourse. I'm here again with Pastor Brian.
Hello.
And this time we're going to talk about the Nephilim, which come up in the show just briefly a couple of times, and so they haven't touched on them a whole lot, and so we're going to talk about it a little bit. And so Brian?
Yeah, they may not have said Nephilim, but it does, as we examine this and what are Nephilim and how does that, it really does seem to kind of like always be there, because really so much of the show is about angels who are attracted to human women, which is exactly what that chapter, what's it, Genesis 6:4, I forget exactly, but where, that's exactly what it says, is that the
Sons of
Nephilim
God found the daughters of men. Good
Yeah.
Yeah.
That whole sons of God, daughters of men thing too, some people say that's about Seth, some people and Seth's descendants. Some of them say, the angels are the fallen ones. There's a lot there, but I do think it's hard to miss throughout this series, just with so much attraction going on between the angels and the humans, especially male identified angels with human women. And of course we get this happen, right? We get a male angel impregnate a female human, so it happens.
It happens, but it's apparently, it seems to be unique in the sense that when Remiel comes down and has the argument with Menadiel, she of course thinks that the baby is Lucifer's, and she says, well, he's basically been a slut for so long that it's just surprising that this didn't happen before. So, but she doesn't think it's a Menadiel's. So you're thinking, well, okay, it must never really have happened before, because here she is thinking it has to be Lucifer because he's the one that sleeps around all the time. But it still would be like a very singular thing, But then it only happens to Menadiel after he's lost his wings, he's lost his powers, he's basically living as a human on Earth. So he's not really angelic so much when it happens. So you would think,
but the nature of that baby seems to be very clearly Nephilim, right? I mean,
I don't know. It hasn't sprouted wings. People keep expecting that the baby might have wings or the baby might have powers. Even the demons that want to sacrifice it or whatever, or turn it into the new king of hell, assume it's going to have angel powers. And like when Linda is worried that if someone takes it to heaven, it won't be able to leave, Lucifer's like, it's half angel. They find it can come and go when it wants. But we haven't seen that happen. Also, we've just had characters assume it will happen like that.
It is kind of interesting that there were no little angel wings, which would have been interesting. But then that goes into, which again I think is a mistranslation or a conglomeration, but that gets into where the evidence of that in Genesis are the giants, right? And so, maybe that is what happens to these Nephilim, is that they're
Gigantic.
Are some kind of superhuman, or but they do not look like angels. They look more like humans, maybe.
Yeah, we don't really get a lot about them in the Bible either. I know the X-Files tackled them in an episode where they basically turned out to be like autistic kids who were like trapped in their own heads by their, like, I guess, mystical powers or whatever. So they were completely like not responsive, and they would just sort of like, this angel was going around basically killing them to release their souls to go to heaven or something. I can't remember how Mulder and Scully solved that one, but we see them as disabled or differently abled, or however you want to put someone who's to the point where they cannot associate with the outside world.
Almost autistic. That's almost like being deeply in the spectrum.
So affected by their ancestry in a way that makes them completely non-functional, but that's not really how we understand them to be generally, right? That they're more powerful. They were the giants of the earth. They were the men of renown of old. I think it says a couple of verses later. So you're talking about, at least for the people writing this down, they are their versions of Hercules or Perseus or Gilgamesh. These are the great renowned men of old who could do great things because they had this divine parentage.
And we see fingerprints all over especially that early part of Genesis, we see fingerprints from Persia and Zoroastrianism and Babylon and, you know, Gilgamesh and Enkidu. That, like, you can see all those, that influence
Certainly
because,
borrowing the flood story.
yeah, I
So,
mean, so that influence of that time, that captivity of the elites in Babylon, very clearly as they return and start to write this stuff down, it's been influenced, and so I think the Nephilim are probably widely influenced by that further Eastern thought.
yeah, so we don't really know what they're going to do with them on the show. Clearly, something called the Nephilim must have existed, or Lucifer wouldn't be able to reference it in season 2. But we've never been. It was just like name dropped. You know, like the word Nephilim came out, no details ever emerged. So we have no idea in this universe how this works.
I think it might be in danger.
What is it the accuser? A Nephilim? 1 million mums?
Rabbis who I heard talk about it were in agreement that they're fallen and that they're soulless. And so I thought that was interesting. And we've spoken before about how these angels are soulless, and are like, especially like Maze, right?
The demons are. The angels do
Yeah,
seem to have souls.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I would kind of make them demons in a way, because those are the only soulless characters we've had show up so far on Lucifer.
And there's always the mythology of this series versus mythology of the Bible. It feels like this series is pretty easy to pick up on further Eastern thought, though. So I do like the idea of Gilgamesh kind of mixed into the Nephilim idea here.
Well, yeah, Gilgamesh is supposed to be weirdly, 2/3 God and 1/3 human. I don't know how that works genetically, obviously. But the people writing this down didn't know about genetics, so his mother is a goddess, and somehow he ends up being 2/3 God. But then all these guys in the Greek myths too, like Hercules and Perseus, they're basically most of the time sons of Zeus, right? Although occasionally maybe some other, Poseidon or somebody comes along and sires a human child. But they are special, right? They're better than other people. They may not be completely supernatural, but they're at least a slightly better than natural person.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see, I guess, how baby Charlie grows up, if we're going to see that in season 5, if he develops wings or if he develops powers or something.
It would be interesting if he ages more quickly, that we can get a personality out of him and see what happens, and maybe compete with Lucifer for the throne of hell or something.
Maybe. We don't know what he'll be like, right? You'd think that anybody raised by Amenadiel and Maze and Linda is going to have a very interesting childhood, but a very loved childhood. I mean, it looks like this, like 3 people that are going to be crazy about this little kid, right? Even Maze is really head over heels, really, with Trixie. It really breaks her heart when at the beginning of season 4 she's not allowed to see Trixie, and even I think Lucifer, is pretty much. Trixie wraps him around her fingers. He's a sucker for little kids too, which is interesting. As much as he says he despises them, but then of course she loves him right back too. So, and she loves Maze. So we'll have to see how Charlie does this. But you'd think at some point, if he starts aging really quickly or develops wings or has powers, at some point, Dan or Ella or some of these other characters are going to have to notice. And I think that's going to be funny when Ella finally figures that, yes, this is Satan, basically, that I work with, and I took him to Mass one time. If you remember, back at the beginning of season 2, he wanted her to do him a favor, so she did him a favor, and then the return favor was he had to go to church with her, and so she did take him to a Mass. And at some point, if she figures out who he really is, she's going to realize that she sat next to Satan during the Catholic Mass. So.
And there are all kinds of adolescents going through their emo stage who just love that, right?
So we don't know how Charlie's going to turn out. But the Nephilim themselves in the Bible are kind of scarce, kind of hard to find. You get a couple of verses there in Genesis and maybe a verse later in Ezekiel or Isaiah or something, but not much.
Yeah.
So.
And so you get, I mean, yeah, and so if you think about how the Bible comes together, there's some memory, there's probably several different conflicting memories, and they try and pull it together into one thing, you know what I mean? And it's interesting how the Bible will remember something that you would think would just be lost, but it's in there, but it's just very unclear. You know, and I think it's just pulling together too many different traditions over too much time.
Too many
And
translations. Yeah.
and I don't think this was the original. You know, again, like I said, and then you get the Noah's Ark thing. Like it's just pulling together way too much from too many different places, and I think that's why it's incomprehensible biblically. Really, that's really what it is.
Okay, so any final thoughts on Nephilim?
Well, I just think we've been dealing a lot with angels, and I think it's a natural step to see. As much as these angels have been attracted to humans, it's a natural step to see what happens when they make a baby together. But it almost seems like it would need a whole new series, really, to follow this whole different life.
Well, there were some little talks a few weeks ago online that Netflix was considering a season 6. So we don't know how that's going to go. Obviously, we're currently under a pandemic, and a lot of shows have shut down production. So I think all the Marvel shows are not filming anymore. Obviously, everything that had a release date no longer has a release date. Disney went ahead and released Frozen 2 on Disney Plus, I think, instead of in the theaters. So a lot of upset's going to be happening, and just the practical, could we get our actors back? You tell them you're going to end it with season 5, then their agents are going to go try to sign them up for something else, right? So, will you have everybody back if there is a season 6? Or is this just so disruptive with a shutdown of all these productions that it's just impossible? Just the real world practical implications of a virus and a pandemic, and how do you, continue your production of your TV shows. We'll have to see how that all pans out too.
Yeah, Genesis would say some interesting things about this pandemic, wouldn't it? Well, this is I think the Nephilim thing is they've got to do more with it. I just feel like in season 5,
Well,
they at least have to stake what they believe about it. I think.
Let's hope that they do.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us for another episode of Infernal Intercourse. We'll see you next time. If you liked it, please hit like and subscribe and hit that bell notification so you know when I put more videos up. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.